So let's turn the corner this morning just a little bit and let's begin to think about what are the distinctions that we call dispensationalism. I mean, what would we call them? How would we see them in the scriptures? Well, if you begin to read from Genesis 1 on, you begin to read the creation account, you begin to see God made some very sweeping promises, or what we call covenants. I think there are no less than 9 of these covenants that we can see in the scriptures, and given to certain people at certain times, and they carried certain promises and actually sometimes curses with them. Now, when we think about these covenants, they really form for us the bones, as it were, of dispensationalism. And why do I say that? Well, because in each of these covenants, God either made a covenant like this: if you do this, then I'll do that. Or he said, this is what I'm going to do regardless of what you do. Well, in these covenants that we can find in the scriptures, like for instance, the Edenic covenant, as it's called. The Edenic covenant is a covenant where God said to Adam and Eve, I want you to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And if you'll do that and you won't eat that one tree over there, then you will have a long life in this beautiful place that he created called the Garden of Eden. Well, we all know the story, don't we? I mean, he gave them that covenant. He told them, if you will just simply do these things, then I will bless you and I'm going to give you life. And the tree of life was not held back from them. They were allowed to eat of that. But Adam and Eve chose to listen to the voice of the serpent, and by so doing, they failed. They lost the Garden of Eden. In fact, they lost the Garden of Eden for all of us. Their responsibility was to subdue, was to fill, was to bring the world into subjection to themselves, and they failed. They failed and they sinned. And because of that, God's judgment fell upon Adam and Eve and all of us. He restricted their entrance back into the Garden of Eden. And from that moment on, man has both died physically and, of course, are born dead spiritually. Now, if you'll think with me for just a minute, that very concept that I just went through is a concept that we're going to see between all of the covenants and all of the dispensations. They all relate to 3 main things. God makes a covenant and gives man some kind of responsibility. He said, this is what you are to do. And then man is going to fail, and God's judgment is going to fall. Now, a covenant, as I said earlier, can be an if-then covenant, or it can be an I will do this covenant. They are called a conditional covenant or an unconditional covenant. In fact, there are 2 words in the New Testament that are used to differentiate between those 2 covenants. And moving forward in our next installment, we're going to take those 3 concepts and we're going to begin to link those covenants to the dispensational times in the history of the rolling out of Scripture, the rolling out of God's prophetic plan, God's plan for the world, God's eternal plan. As he rolls that out, we're going to link those covenants with those distinct time periods we're going to call dispensations. And we're going to see how God gave responsibility and man failed and he judged them. But how that some of these covenants were very unconditional, which means God, even though man failed to keep them, God will still keep his word to what he said. And there will be 4 of these that we will see very clearly as we move forward is really the basis for what we're going to see in the future. Well, for today, I just want you to understand there are covenants, there are dispensations, they are linked, and we're going to link them together in future installments of our little series. So thank you for joining me again today as we begin to break down in a very clear fashion what dispensations are, what their names are, what the time periods were, if we can note that, how they're related to the covenants. So join me again on my next installment of Dispensationalism Today.